Well, you're gonna find some way to deal with the emotions,
Right.
and the easiest way to deal with them is to actually manage the symptoms.
He does this thing where he says, I see the pain that you're trying to inflict, and I raise you grace. He looks to Ben for permission. Am I allowed to say this?
Can I say that, Ben? No, COVID didn't cause the mental health issues. It was the way we responded to COVID. And that's the same thing with pain. We always are concerned about ruptures in relationships, but we don't realize that ruptures are opportunities for repair.
Like, my mind, I think that suffering is just pain over time.
Like, suffering happens when I see you're in pain and I'm not with you in it. Yeah, exactly.
Dude, this is cool. That's like so simple.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Less Heresy Than Expected podcast. We are your fanciful hosts, Jeremy Krider and Stephen Barton, with our lovely producer, Ben Vanus. It is the first time that Ben's been on the or not on the podcast, or been helping us produce the podcast now.
You heard his voice here first. Proof of life.
Yeah, so when we become famous, you'll be the first on board. No. Love it. So this week we are discussing conversation of pain. Some might call it the problem of pain, if you are going by the last name of Lewis. We read that, me and my colleagues, we read that when I was going through college, obviously, and it was really awesome. I learned a lot from it, and then I started getting into this whole grace saves all concept, and then I reread that book. Heresy. And I was like, this is awful. This book kind of sucks, because he's just like constantly like shoving down your throat like hellfire and brimstone. At least recently while I was going through it, that's how I felt.
You're talking about that Lewis guy is doing that.
C.S. Lewis, yeah.
Yeah.
Who did I reference?
Not David Artman.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So sure.
When I read, sorry. When I read through C.S. Lewis's The Problem of Pain, it was rough. David Artman wrote. Was it David Artman?
It was David Artman. Grace Saves All.
Grace Saves All. Yeah, that was good. That was very good.
Yeah. Phenomenal book.
Shout out to David Artman. He has a YouTube channel, doesn't he?
He has a podcast. I don't think he has a YouTube channel. There is a YouTube channel that has some of his stuff on it. Oh. But he has a podcast. The Grace That Saves All podcast.
I see.
So
we can link that.
He's doing good stuff.
Yeah.
So pain. We're talking about pain, and what is pain, and sort of some questions centered around pain, and some thoughts about relationships and whatnot.
So what would you say pain is? Seeing that everybody kind of understands in their own likeness what they understand pain to be. Well, right. What's your working definition of pain?
Right. I think pain is something that we all experience, as you said, is universal.
Yeah.
If you're alive, you're experiencing pain. So I think the reason why, and this is going to touch on another point of our questions that we have here, I think the reason why we experience pain is that we were not meant to be disconnected or alone or isolated. We're meant to be connected, and when we, through our circumstances, feel a loss of that connection, we experience pain and then sometimes suffering. So pain is the sense that something's not right, something is gone wrong, not just bodily but also relational. Obviously, when you experience pain in your body, something's not working the way it should be.
Right.
It can be a sign of something a larger problem, perhaps. An emotional pain, obviously, and existential pain, like why am I here? So sometimes pain can be related to very, abstract questions as well, not just physical stuff, emotional stuff.
That's good. Yeah, I see pain as basically the my car has a check engine light on right now, and it's had it, as many of us have check engine lights for a while because we ignore them for a while, but it's getting fixed soon. But I see pain like the check engine light of my car. Like, it is telling me that there's something that's not to wholeness within the system, and I need to go check it out. And so, but that's not how I think most people see pain, and I don't know. Maybe you can correct me if you've heard differently, but I would assume that people see pain as like a bad thing or a good thing, and the assumption comes in that I assume that people see pain as a moral question, as having moral weight to it, because we say things like, well, that feels bad. Pain feels bad. And that the bad portion, like that word bad in association with pain, is then getting muddled into some sort of a morality of pain, when a check engine light is neither good or bad. It's just kind of there letting you know, it's the messenger that's bringing you a letter saying that something's happening. But what are your thoughts on, like, why like, because C.S. Lewis goes into a lot, and a lot of people go into, like, the morality of pain. Why don't you see it as a moral question, like having moral weight to it?
Right. So we agree in this podcast that pain is itself morally neutral. However, I think that there is a connection with moral issues. For example, if I do something that is immoral and I cause pain for someone else, there is some sort of connection.
Oh, between the immoral act
exactly.
and the pain that's now received.
Exactly.
Or experienced. Okay.
Yeah, and
I see.
And we can also tie this in another conversation at another time. Where does shame and guilt and condemnation play into this for the person who causes pain? So there is some sort of relationship there, but I don't see a moral, shall we say, a moral judgment upon. I don't see pain as a moral agent in this situation. I think it's just a byproduct, as a result of dysfunction or adverse events within the context of a relationship.
So do you think that, now this is coming from having many conversations with college students in a college town, a lot of folks see the purpose of life as a big search for just happiness, and or AKA avoidance of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that as worthwhile? Or like if pain is, like, if you see what I'm asking there? Like,
go a little bit further into that.
Yeah, so like, I am seeing this as like pain as, how do I explain this? Because I'm talking from their perspective, really. Like, if I had a ton of conversations where people are like, well, like, I just feel like, all religion is just pointing towards living a happy life and, avoiding pain. And it's like, well, if you're an aesthetic worshiper, that's not necessarily the case. You're finding joy in the pain, actually, in a certain light, or through, maybe not in, but through. And so it's like, okay, so pain is only being, it is labeled as having a moral weight to it because it is associated with a morality. Like, your immoral action is now causing me pain, and therefore my pain is immoral because of the action. But no, not really, because it's just the action that's immoral, not the pain.
Right. So
the
part of
life,
part of what's going on here is, we tend to identify the deeds with the way we feel about it, and there is a natural connection here, but they're not the same thing. And since pain is something that in large part is something that we want to avoid. We do all we can to do that, to stay away, to avoid it. And so sometimes that leads to other activities or relationships that cause more pain. So we get into a bit of a vicious cycle.
A loop, yeah.
Yeah. So if this is not too controversial,
it's less heresy than expected.
That's true.
And we're okay with that.
Yeah. More controversial, but less heretical than expected.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, there you
go. I was listening to a conversation recently that I was not a part of, but I was in earshot. And someone who was here in State College recently for a psychology conference was talking about the effect of COVID on mental health.
Mm.
I mean, the studies are just coming out the wazoo right now, all these mental health issues and how COVID has affected the state of the youth and all this and whatnot. And this person made the statement, COVID caused all these mental health issues, and now, kids are needing counseling more than ever. And since I was not part of the conversation, I didn't interject, but then I thought to myself, no, COVID didn't cause the mental health issues. It was the way we responded to COVID. And that's the same thing with pain.
Mm.
You can either respond to pain, to something that is unpleasant, something that you would want to avoid or see as a challenge or see as a hindrance. You can respond to it in a healthy way, and that pain can actually be used for something good in your life called resilience.
Mm.
Or if you don't handle it the right way and you continue to suffer because of the pain, and that's a whole nother conversation, pain and suffering, that pain will lead to resentment in your life. So two very different outcomes from what could be a very similar situation.
So what would be, so like for one, what, like, let's get into like a little bit, if we can, the like how do we normally deal with pain, and why do we do it like that? Like, because my natural tendency is to run away from pain, and I think that's kind of where I was going with the conversations that I've had with college students, is that like, is that their understanding is that like what our response towards pain is that we should avoid it basically at all costs. And so it is somebody with COVID without a mask. We should just like avoid them at all costs. And so it's like, is that even healthy to avoid pain, or even the possibility of pain in that way?
So here's an interesting contrast to your situation. I remember years ago a college student who told me that whenever he was offered some sort of anesthesia, some sort of pain numbing medication, he would deny it. He said that he wanted to experience the pain. Now this was someone who was a bodybuilder. He was interested in actually embracing pain. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him, I'm like, I'm completely opposite of you. I do not want to have any sort of pain at all. Yeah. I go to the dentist, I'm like, you better numb that up before you put any needle close to it.
And say sorry afterwards.
That's right. I want my little care package when I head out there, from the dentist's office. And luckily I have a great dentist, so I'm just putting that out there. But yeah, I think we have this tendency to react towards it where we don't see it as something that could, not all pain is the same, but there are situations that we could choose, if we wanted to view it as a challenge and a task to make us better. But a lot of pain obviously is not only experienced by us because of us, but also because of other people. And perhaps it's the second category there that we tend to try and avoid pain as much as we can. And I think you're leading up to the ways of handling pain, such as fighting and fleeing. So here's some things that people probably don't want to hear or don't like to hear. Is your brain has three major sections or areas to it. You have the lower brainstem, which is where all of your involuntary processes occur and are initiated and controlled. Your breathing, your blood pressure, your digestion, these sorts of things.
Right.
And then you have a part of your brain that is geared towards your emotions and your feelings, and it can affect your digestive system and some of your processes as well. It submits chemicals or commands your body to emit chemicals and based on your need. Then you have your upper brain portion, the prefrontal cortex and whatnot, which is where your logical and rational thinking comes from, your intelligence.
Right.
So
I've heard it like left brain, right brain situation. Right.
Well, the left brain, right brain is more in the mid and the right. The upper part. So what I'm saying is that when someone is controlled through their emotions primarily, we would call that person immature, but the reality is they're probably much more tuned to, I hate to say it this way, but a less mature way of handling emotions, and they don't have the rational self-regulating principle because they didn't learn that from someone else in their own life.
Right.
So their thoughts are always astray, and we don't experience pain, the same every time. It goes in cycles. If there was one cure-all answer to pain, we would probably be pretty good. But pain tends to move around in different forms and affect different areas of our life. But what I'm saying is, like, as we mature in life, we're supposed to have learned how to self-regulate and to manage these things with our rationality and even incorporating our imagination to actually see the scenario differently. But when we're so controlled by our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous systems, and those things aren't working right to balance us,
right,
in terms of our attention and our ability to ease ourselves and to calm ourselves,
self-soothe,
to soothe ourselves, then our emotions can sort of fly out. Now, this is a whole nother conversation, of course, but what we're seeing a generation that is less able to move into the higher thinking and actually handle their emotions, and that has a lot to do with the foundational relationships and the very, very, very early soothing needs that occur within the first 2 months of life, and then the foundational relationships of the caregivers within the first 5 or 6 lives. So
what happens when people don't know how to process and handle their emotions?
Well, you're gonna find some way to deal with the emotions,
right?
And the easiest way to deal with them is to actually manage the symptoms, and so we become addicted to chemicals.
Is that what coping is?
It's a coping mechanism.
Okay.
Yeah, in that sense, yeah. So then people who have experienced, in this case, trauma in early age, they become addicts, and that can take a lot of different forms. It doesn't have to be something that's just a drug-related experience. It could be an addiction to success. It could be an addiction to applause and acclamation from friends, acknowledgement. It can be
or proving your naysayers wrong, kind of thing.
Yeah. There's one reason why amusement parks are so popular is because they actually help soothe people who need that extra excitement to feel balanced and to feel alive, as opposed to just being able to delight in the very simple beauties of life. As the song goes, "'Tis a gift to be simple." So that's really hard to imagine for some people. I'm not saying that any of those things are necessarily bad, morally speaking. It can lead to activities that are not helpful and can cause problems in society, of course.
Right.
But we manage pain and suffering in different ways, for sure.
Yeah, and I only know the 4 main ways that I've heard, and then like I don't know, maybe a few months ago, I heard that there was a fifth way, and then you told me
Yeah, I
in
didn't have,
preparation for this.
like
There's
I said, I didn't have a chance to look that up for
a
this.
sixth.
This I don't know if there's a sixth one, but there's the response to fear and to pain and suffering is to fight it, to stand it, to become angry about it. There is the fleeing, where you just want to escape it. And then there is what was it? Fawning, where you're in a situation of you're afraid of someone, and you sort of try your best to appease them. That would be fawning. And then what else?
You said that there was a feign.
A feign. To
Yeah.
feign. This is something
I've
heard
never
recently.
heard that. Yeah.
To feign simply means to just fake it. Basically.
Oh right.
You're just doing what you need to do to survive.
Right.
You just kind of do what you got to do. But is that
which sounds similar to like what you would be doing, like what the rest of the five would be doing, right? It's like they are ways of handling it in order to survive.
It's a way to cope, yeah,
right?
For sure.
Trick question for you: how did which of those 5 or 6 methods was Jesus's favorite way of handling his pain? Trick question.
Long pause.
Yeah. Trick question.
Clearing.
I have the answer. I'll just.
I would say,
answer.
Jesus fought back, but he did so in a healthy way. Like he stood up against, like a book that we read recently, thanks to Ben. There's a shout out for Ben right there.
Benvenues.
Ben, it's a book called Jesus versus the Bad Guys.
Oh yeah, that was your suggestion. Oh man.
Yeah,
that was a great
book.
Yes.
Jesus versus the Bad Guys. Connor, I forget his last name. Sorry. And Jared Neusch are the authors, the 2 authors. But it says in that book that Jesus fought injustice. He stood up against injustice, but he did so in a way that was healthy. Fleeing, I would say, in terms of fleeing, if Jesus were to flee, he'd flee to the Father.
Mm-hmm.
He would trust on the Father, and he did that, of course. He didn't feign. He didn't fake anything.
Right.
So.
And he didn't try to appease to somebody, like fawning, right?
Right.
Hey, the trick question that I asked you, what was Jesus' favorite way to respond?
Call down fire.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Sons of Thunder. No, the thought that comes to mind for me is the BEMA podcast. Did a really great episode on this, and I've mentioned it in a previous episode in which, it says but Jesus says is teaching that if somebody slaps you on, what was it, your left cheek, right? Or no, your right cheek. If somebody smacks you on your right cheek, then give them your left cheek also, right? Because, and as they bring it, as Marty Solomon breaks it down in that episode, in that day and age, you don't have toilet paper. It seems off topic, but so you're going to be wiping with something. So you use your left hand. I think it was your left hand. I'm going to use my left hand for now. Anyway, Ben concurs. Great. I've got permission to continue.
You mentioned not having toilet paper, and I thought we were back talking
into
about COVID.
Yeah,
COVID.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So you wouldn't be doing anything with your left hand anyway. You'd be doing your things with your right hand, especially if you're interacting with somebody else. So if you are going to smack somebody, you are going to use the open palm of your right hand slapping their left cheek. But you only do that if they are on equal level status with you, So when he says if somebody slaps you on your right cheek, they are backhanding you. So if they are backhanding you, they are implying a lower status than yourself, than themselves. Right.
Their superiority.
They're showing their superiority and at the same time harming you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, okay, so I see your pain, and this is what he does constantly. It's freaking awesome. He does this thing where he says, I see the pain that you're trying to inflict, and I raise you grace. I see the pain that you're trying to inflict, and I raise you grace. I see that, and I raise you. I see that, and I raise you. So I see that you're slapping me, and like you're inflicting pain, and you're demoralizing me at the same time. And I raise you my other cheek, because now you have to slap me with the open palm, and therefore I am forcing you to acknowledge me on equal terms. You can harm me, but harm me on equal terms. You're not going to sit here and say that I am any less of a human than you are. And that's just like, that's chilling. I don't know. That freaks me out. That's cool. You know, and if somebody tells you to, carry their stuff 1 mile, as was the max amount of, distance that a Roman soldier was allowed to force you to carry their stuff, carry it too. Because that's actually illegal for them to force you to do that.
Right.
So now you're being gracious to them. You're helping them. And that's like constantly how he handles pain and, conflict is just like, I see your pain and I raise you love. I raise you grace. And so like, how does he respond within those actions is like, well, like, as you mentioned, as you're going through, like, well, he did get, he did kind of fight back a little bit, but it's not in the same sense, because he's not fighting back how we would. He's fighting back with grace, which is a different kind of fight.
Right. Yeah. So this we're now in the outline portion where you wanted to talk about how the world responds and how Jesus responds.
No, we've covered that.
So
I feel like we've covered it. Unless you have more.
Like we've covered it. Yeah, we have. Well,
okay.
I think we can sum it up at this point and solidify it.
Yeah. Sum it up
and
for
basically say, the world's way of responding to violence, or to pain, is to anesthetize it, to avoid it,
right?
To deaden it somehow, either by fleeing from it or.
There's a quote that goes somewhat like that. There's a quote.
It's probably on this.
It's in there. I saw you brought in a quote. Let me read this for y'all.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I don't know if this is from Roar. It's underneath the first point. It says, pain signals need, not just bodily, but relationally, emotionally, existentially. Pain in itself is morally neutral. Our responses to pain shape virtue or vice. Pain can become a doorway to deeper trust in God and greater compassion for others. Brene Brown teaches that unharsh pain leads to shame and isolation. When pain is hidden, it metastasizes. Is that the word that you were looking for?
Yep, metastasizes.
Yeah. So Brene Brown brings that in, that it metastasizes. It metastasizes into bitterness and self-hatred. Pain in life usually isn't linear. We move back and forth between these stages, and sometimes they overlap. Kind of like what you were bringing in earlier with like how it's fluid.
Yeah, you skipped over that Richard Rohr quote at the very top.
Oh, is that part of it?
Read that one. That's really good.
Sorry. It starts off with, if we do not transform our pain, we will most assuredly transmit it.
So that was Jesus's alternative response to pain.
Right.
He actually embraced the pain. He embraced the injustice through grace and through compassion and through love, and by doing so, he transformed it. Another word for that is he transmuted it. Yeah. He changed it into something that was actually beneficial for all, instead of transmitting it. Right.
This is totally silly. Completely. Should I prepare myself? A little bit.
Right, so get some coffee here.
It I have this video in mind. I'll put the video in it, the little clip. It's from Kung Fu Panda.
Nice.
And it's like it's right towards the end where the bad guy punches Kung Fu Panda so far deep into his belly that he like gets kind of absorbed, like about shoulder deep, and then I can't remember his name. Kung Fu Panda's name.
I don't remember.
Po like goes whoop, and then boing, and like just like shoots him out of his belly, and he like goes flying across the town. It's really freaking funny. That's kind of what I imagine Christ doing with our pain.
I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you say
Yeah.
off me and sticks to you.
Right.
Yeah. So Brene Brown said that connection often comes through embracing our vulnerabilities, not hiding them. So this was also another aspect of Jesus's response. So he sought out connection with his Father when he was experiencing these pains. He made a habit of connecting with his Father on a daily basis. And even as he was suffering on the cross, as we saw in the book that we mentioned, Jesus versus the bad guys, he uses his, quote, secret weapon.
Yeah, right.
And that is to forgive them. So he knew, going to the cross, he knew that the Father would never forsake him, because he told his disciples, you guys are going to think that that I'm alone. And he's like, no, the Father will not leave me alone. And so he seeks out that connection in order to be able to embrace the injustice, embrace the agony of the cross. Why, as we read in Scripture, for the joy set before him, not only of that connection with the Father, but also the benefit that we would receive in him and through him, from that, and from him, I should say.
Yeah.
So that's a very healthy response to pain, and it actually, when handled correctly, it increases that connection. We always are concerned about ruptures in relationships, but we don't realize that ruptures are opportunities for repair. And it's the repair that actually, it's the rupture and the repair that actually strengthens the relationship between two people.
Right. Where is your distinction between pain and suffering? Because that, like, my mind, I think that suffering is just pain over time. But it seems like you have like there is a much greater difference between the two of them.
Yeah, there's a great quote here from Kurt Thompson. He says, pain isn't the enemy. Isolation, resentment, and despair are. When we allow pain to drive us into deeper meaning, deeper connection, and deeper trust, then even our wounds can become places of life. So someone can experience pain but not be suffering. I think suffering comes when you don't see a greater purpose, a greater meaning, a greater value in what you're going through. I also think that suffering, traditionally speaking, is viewed by Christians as like, well, I have to die to self. That's another conversation as well, and that's why we do these podcasts to
keep
say
the conversation,
to say to be continued.
Yeah, right.
But in terms of like sacrifice and suffering, I don't know if true love actually regards suffering as a real sacrifice. I think it's just, that's what you do if you are true love. So what I'm trying to say in that regard is, we look at what Jesus went through and what humanity put him through, and as Peter says, you killed him, on the cross.
Right.
He never says it was the Father who was the active agent in punishing Jesus or anything like that. That's totally 500-year-old theology that we think is Jesus' second announcement once he began his ministry. For some reason,
it's the second announcement. It's oddly specific. I love it.
But I don't know that that from his perspective, somebody can correct me on this. That's fine. Another conversation. We can have feedback on the.
Ben, get the fact checking.
Get the fact checking.
Yeah, get it prepared.
Let me put it like this. Okay. In this, we see in Scripture, Jesus says, "Don't you know I could have, called down legions of angels, 10,000 angels or whatever to come,
Right.
defend me." I have a big problem with Jesus saying that.
Oh,
I really do.
all right.
And okay, everybody's ears are perked up.
Yeah,
now.
my ears are perked up, man.
That's right.
Like
You know?
Jeremy's got beef with Christ.
So Jesus just said right there, that basically there were legions of angels who were ready to come and, obey the command to not, enact fully love. I'm not quite sure that's consistent with God's character. Is God going to not fully enact love? Was that truly an option for God to not follow through on this act of self-sacrifice or self-giving? I think self-giving is better than self-sacrifice. I think what's happening here is we're viewing what Christ is enduring on the cross as suffering. And it certainly was, for sure. But at the same time, we probably had the expectation of like, well, he can come down and just destroy all of us. He can call down fire on us just as much as we wanted to call fire down on the Samaritans or whoever else. That's the God that we imagine, the God of our shame, the God of our pain, the God that we've created.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that had nothing to do with who God was actually, which is why he didn't do it. So my point is like, I think we have to redefine in a lot of ways what suffering and pain is when it comes to God as versus, his perspective and our perspective.
Yeah, so if you were to explain it to a 5-year-old.
A 5-year-old. I thought you were going to say 4-year-old.
Well, sorry. Okay, I can pretend to be a 4-year-old for you.
Yeah. No, don't do that.
No, like, how would you like distinguish what pain is versus suffering for you and me?
See, this is what I like. He's getting me back to the original question that he asked me.
I'm actually still confused. I'm not trying to bring you back. Like I'm that 4-year-old that don't understand fully.
Don't say that.
Well, I genuinely I'm still a little bit lost on like
so back
the difference.
To the idea.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners aren't, and they're like, dude.
Back to the difference between the pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
This idea, we all experience pain. Jesus experienced pain, for sure. Suffering, I think, is more of a mental outlook. Suffering is the way you perceive it.
Oh, so pain is what's actually happening versus suffering is
the way you perceive it.
The way I perceive.
The way you receive it.
Receive the pain.
Yes.
So if the check engine light comes on in my car, that is the pain signaling something's wrong, while the suffering is me feeling anxious about the fact that I need to get it fixed, but I don't want to deal with it.
Or that you don't have the money to fix it.
Or that, yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm tracking now.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so you could also avoid suffering in that situation by looking at that check engine light and just say, "Oh, I know what that means."
Right.
That means that there's something that needs to be looked at in my car.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all there is to it. So you've brought meaning to that pain and you've avoided suffering. So you're no longer anxious. You're not feeling bad necessarily about, okay, I have to wait for the check to come, next week to be able to get this taken care of. You're avoiding suffering in that way.
Mm.
But suffering, as I see it, is really just the way we receive and perceive the pain in our life. Everyone has pain. You can't avoid it. Right. And I think the other aspect that we mentioned earlier is like the reason we have pain is because we're in relationship. Let me bring out 2 points. This is from Parker Palmer, theologian, pastor, really a great writer. He says the human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed, to be seen, heard, and companioned exactly as it is. Mm-hmm. So we experience pain in life, And we can't experience suffering when people just try to fix us. When people just, okay, we'll pray about it some more, and they,
Right.
they over spiritualize stuff.
Right.
Instead of actually just sitting there like Job's companions did for a little while with him
Yeah.
in his pain,
Right.
in the circumstances around here. And then the fools started speaking up.
Right.
Except for the one person, I forget the person's name who actually spoke right.
Mhm.
But it's like suffering happens when I see you're in pain and I'm not with you in it, and I don't feel how you're feeling. I don't try to understand
Right.
what you're going through.
Wow, look
so
at
I
that
can
full
relate.
circle.
And in doing so,
All that.
when I bring relationship
Uh-huh.
to your pain experience, I can eliminate or at least alleviate the suffering that you might be experiencing.
Right.
And so it is true. We simply want to be witnessed. We want to be seen, soothed, safe, and secure, as Kurt Thompson would say.
Yeah.
And Palmer says to be seen, heard, and companion exactly as it is.
So we need those things, and when we don't have those things, then we react out of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or feign.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, this is cool. That's like so simple.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like, hey, if you don't get this, you get this.
The last thing that I wanted to say was Saint Irenaeus famously said that humans are soil that suffers. We're dirt that suffers. And he says this.
That's soothing.
He says this in the context of, yes, we are soil that suffers. We're dirt that suffers.
Yeah.
For sure. But this is also within the context of our future and eventual healing, resurrection, and glorification. So even in this suffering process that St. Irenaeus recognized, he recognized that there's something greater than this here and now experience. And this is why, I think this is why connection is so important to issues of pain and addiction, is because if we can have something, if we can have a view that's higher than just the here and now,
Mm-hmm.
it actually alleviates suffering. And some people find that in different ways. I know people who deal with pain and suffering through very fatalistic, ideologies, and it's like, well, today you're here, you're gone tomorrow, you just endure it or whatever, and that's not helpful. Or,
But like, why endure?
then other people have this idea of like, well, God's just gonna fix everything at the end, and it's gonna be okay. Okay, that's a very oversimplified view of reality, but you need to think that through a little bit more. You need to have a little bit better understanding of this entire process of pain, suffering, detachment, connection, repair and rupture, and all these concepts we've discussed before, and need as well, and community, whatnot. All right. Have we solved the world's problems so far?
Yeah, I think so,
Okay.
actually.
Yeah.
We'll give you, the listeners, and myself some time to digest what we've just discussed. Because there's a couple of bangers there at the end. I'm like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to, like, as I'm editing this, like, process through what we just discussed. And then after that episode, we will be having on the podcast Artman? No, not Artman.
You're thinking of Robbie Atwood.
Robbie Atwood. Yeah, not Atwood. Yeah, Atwood. Robbie Atwood, discussing his book, Fascinated. Was it Living in the Awe? Yeah, Awe of the Father.
Yeah.
So, there's some things to look forward to.
Ciao.